Hello there, friends. So up next is we're going to be doing a rear seat for a 1964 Ferrari 330 GT. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is he has these newer Ferrari seats that are going to go into the car, but he wants the back seat to match the front seats. So here we go. This is customer supplied Ferrari leather. From where else but Italy. And this is the seat that we're duplicating, so we're going to be putting in those pleats, that style, that French stitch, and that is telling us that it is genuine, like we say here in Texas. So gone are going to be this rolling pleat right here, or some people call it tuck and roll. I think I've always called it rolling pleat for 44 years. But anyway, that's the old style there. What we're going to be doing is duplicating these pleats right there. And you can see there is no welt anywhere on that modern seat. But there is on this old seat. And I wrote there no welt. So just to remind me, that'd be a tragedy if I actually put welt back there again. So right away, we're going to start off with technique number 31. Okay, so because that number is so low, it must be really important, right? So pay attention. Okay, technique number 31, literally, okay, is doing the hard part first. So that way, when you get the hard part out of the way, the rest of it is downhill. So the hard part I'm considering to be this backrest here, and the easier parts are going to be these bottom cushions. So we're going to get started with that. So my customer Matt at Reoriginals, okay, he's the one that is rebuilding these old Ferraris here in Goodrich, Texas. So what he does is he gets like all his engines and parts, everything directly from Italy. So what he did is he started, all these metal pieces on here used to be old and rusty. So he went ahead and reconditioned those metal parts before I get started on everything. Looks like some Italian guy wrote on the way back in 1964. When you hit the like button, other people have the opportunity to see this video too. So let the disassembly begin. If I could just hear the threads just popping. Look at that. That's what I'm talking about. See, if we had a brand new sharp razor blade, there's always a chance of cutting into the leather like that. We don't want to do that. See what I'm talking about? The serrated edge doesn't cut through. What would happen to that leather right now if this was a brand new blade? See, so that's proof right there that what we want is to destroy the thread, not the material. Wow, look at that. I didn't fast forward that. That's in real time. Because I'm going to put a seam right here on this corner. I'm going to go ahead and mark that. We'll make a seam right there. That's going to be a whole brand new pattern. So now, if I had a sharp razor blade, I could cut it there. Let's see if this works. If I saw like a saw, maybe I can get it done. Okay, there's a new pattern right there. Sometimes you never know what you're going to find underneath your seat cover. Nastiness. Look at that mess. Look at all those staples there. Looks like they didn't want this cover to come flying off the car if the car's going 280 miles an hour. So making parts out of this leather hide here, it's usually best if you do some planning because you want to have minimal waste. I can only imagine how much he probably paid for this leather hide. So I'm sure it's going to be pretty expensive. So what I decided to do is I'm going to go, because these pieces fit the width of this hide. And remember, we're going to have that really long welt that goes in the back here. So I saw that there's a little bit extra there on the end. And that's where that welt is going to come from. Okay, let's start patterning and cutting. I'm going to be using this 1/4 inch backed foam on everything here. See how it's got that fabric backing, or it's called scrim. So I'm going to be using this on every part. You can see that originally it didn't have anything. There's no foam there. So I'm going to give the seat a nice plusher, more comfortable look and a fuller look. So let's start off by making our patterns here. I'm going to go ahead and draw it out. This is my imaginary line here because I'm going to be making that extra part right here on the end. I can see that this goes out to here, and I'm just going to continue this one right here. That's that corner. So I'll go over to the opposite side, mark the end of that. Now that I have all the edges marked, that's where I use my straight edge. Straight edge is next. So I think I'm going to start with the top here. Now I want to make sure it's the same width all the way across, so let's see what that's going to be. Looks like probably about a 10 here. Let's see what it is on the other side. Oh, not bad, 10 1/4. So we're going to call it 10 1/4. 10 1/4 right here. Make that straight edge. There we go. Oh, it's a little bit painful cutting into this leather because you know what? Once you start cutting, you can't go back. So because I'm going to be sewing or gluing the 1/4 inch scrim to the back of this material here, what I'm going to do is leave about a 1/4 inch extra material. So I'm going to be cutting about a 1/4 inch on the outside of my mark. And there's Miss Nibbles, the Wonder Dog. Let's do your Wonder Dog act, okay? You can get your tummy rubbed. So now I have these marks on this end, so I'm going to go ahead and transfer them to this end right here in the back side. And what we're going to do is technique number 439. What that is taking this end, match it up with this end, and then we know we have a mirror image. Now I can mark that based on the other side right there. You see that? Now it's time for our long top welt. So all I'll be doing now is just taking this straight edge right here, which is actually about 2 inches wide, and I'll go ahead and mark that. So one thing I should have mentioned earlier was that before you start cutting into the leather, you should inspect it and make sure that there's no flaws or natural blemishes that are in the leather here or there, because it's natural. It came off of a cow. Okay, it's not like it's vinyl that comes off of a roll. So anyway, you always want to check for blemishes or imperfections before you start planning and cutting. Okay, so the other thing is use the inner part of the hide as often as you can. The outer edges like this, okay, they tend to be a lot thicker than the insides. So you'll want to use these areas last, and usually that's what ends up being waste, something that you throw in the trash. Okay, but sometimes when you're in a pinch and you're running out of leather, and sometimes in an area like this that's not being seen, that goes to the back, it's okay to use that thick leather. So that's what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to make this piece right here close to that edge. So remember that mess up that we saw where they made a wrong pattern. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to compensate for that. So I'm going to tell the future so I can see where I have to make the new pattern change. So I do the same thing. I do all the edges, and then I take my straight edge. See if this one will work. I guess that'll work. Now it's time to duplicate these pleats on the new pattern. So being that this is Ferrari, I guess we should probably go millimeter. Okay, so what I am seeing here is that looks like about 50. Oh no, that one's about 50. This one here is about 53. This one here is about 54. So okay, you know, nobody's perfect, right? That's the other thing I was noticing here on the backrest. This one here says about 45, and this one right next to it says about almost 55. So even at the factory, they made this pleat smaller than that pleat. So that means I have to do the same exact thing on this back seat. The first thing I want to do is make sure that everything's going to be square. So I'll take my square, mark it, now based on that I can go ahead and start marking out my pleats. So I know my seat insert is going to be this width right there, and it's going to be this length right there. So what I'm seeing here is 16 inches. So I'll mark it here 16. The length is 18. So I'll mark this 18. And that is our size right there. Oh, that's why I have a square here, right? That's exactly the reason I have this. make sure it's square. So I think I figured out what they did. So if you go to the end here, that's about 55 millimeter. And if you go here between pleats, it's about 55. So what they actually did, instead of starting here, they started back here. So I need to do what they did. I need to start from this edge, start at 55. And then go 5. So 55 plus 5. 55 plus 5. And so on. 55 plus 5. 55 plus 5. Mark the same on the other side. Having to be so accurate on something like this, I think this is what I'm going to be starting out with here. This is my 1970s pencil. Okay, you could tell because there's no eraser, because everybody always used to eat those. So I'm going to be using a pencil so that way we can get really accurate, because these pleats are only 5 millimeters apart. So if I'm off by 1 millimeter, can you imagine that? Anywhere, it'll be crooked and you're going to see the imperfection. And we don't want that, because everybody's going to know that I did it or that you did it. So I marked my first line with a pencil. I measured my 5 millimeters on both sides here, because I'm doing 2 seat inserts. So that's why we're going to mark them both at the same time. That way they're both exactly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and take my straight edge, find my 5 millimeter mark, and draw it out. Pencil's going to be a little harder to see on camera, but that's how I'm going to do it. And then the other thing I discovered is that this straight edge that I'm using here is going to work perfect for the width of our pleat. So I'm just going to use this all the way down with the 5 millimeters in between. So now I have to make an opposite for the other side. So I'm going to do with this pattern, just flip it over face to face. That's how we know that we're going to have an opposite. I wouldn't advise using a black Sharpie pen though on expensive Ferrari leather if you think that there's a chance that you might make some kind of mistake, because this is permanent ink marker, and you know what that means. What the heck is that? We're in Livingston, Texas. Well, it looks like I'll be able to get this piece out of this piece of leather right here, this pattern right here. So I'm going to go for it. So this is another one where it was messed up on the original pattern, where I think that we needed more material. Using my imagination here, because this is missing, right? Okay, got it all marked out now. So now I got to make the patterns for the two ends. So just let it lay in its natural state like that. And just imagine what it probably would have looked like. Are you an artist? I leave it long here. It doesn't really matter, right? I think you got that right there, right? You saw that. You saw that happen. Now make one for the other side. What do? Just flip it over. Now we can start foaming up our pieces. For those of you that constantly ask what I use for glue, this is what I use right here. It's all I use. I never use the stuff in the spray can that sounds like 3 men, because it's unreliable. And this is never been unreliable to me for 44 years. Now we'll do the same for all the rest of the pieces. So I've got all my parts cut out, getting ready to sew everything up. And if you think about it, this is really the only waste I have for that whole backrest. Not too bad, right? See, that's what we try to do. We try to be as efficient as possible, especially with expensive materials. So I hope you're paying attention, okay? This is what happens when you realize that you only have one shot at this, okay, that you can't screw this one up. Okay. That's what it's supposed to look like, right? Okay, I'm just going to continue and do all the rest of them. Wow, what a tight wire rope act that was. And I did it all without a net. So for you younger guys, what I just demonstrated there was old school. No computer aided anything. That was old school upholstery right there. That was not a CNC machine. So one of the commenters asked me about now it's time to make the welt. Okay, so I can see right here with my own eyes that it does say welt. It doesn't say beading. It doesn't say piping. So this is why I've always known it, because that's the only way I've ordered it for 44 years. So I'm going to do the welt. Now we'll go ahead and make our patterns. I'll just go ahead and leave that long right there. No harm in it being long. Maybe you remember the situation where it was really weird right here in that corner. I decided I'm going to go ahead and add this little flap right here, which will kind of make it conform to that shape a lot better, I think. I'm going to give it a try and see what happens. Okay, I'm liking that a lot better now. I'm just going to go ahead and continue. And now for technique number 197. What that is when we're putting these two insert pieces together here with the center piece. Okay, so what we want to happen is we want these pleats here to match these corresponding pleats here. We want them to be straight across from each other. So believe it or not, I have seen where people have sewn them like this where they don't match up. You're going to see here what I'm talking about. You see that straight edge right there? You see how that pleat doesn't match up? So what we need to do is we need to get it like that. Okay, so that way they're both going to match all the way down. So in comments, one of my favorite sayings is, there's always more than one way to get something done. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So we're basically going to take this panel here, fold it in half right there, and guess what? There's our pleats right there. So I'm just going to take Mr. Sharpie here, and I'm going to just mark right there where the pleats go. So now that I have those marks, I'll take this other one, insert right here, and when I go to sew it up, look at that. I know now. No guessing. Now we're going to sew on the listing. Make sure that the open side is going to be the side that's getting sewn, not the closed side. Now we're going to sew on the ends of the top portion. So what I have here is I have my marks that I'm going to be matching up right here. So what we do is we start in the center and work our way out. Flip it over, start in the center, work our way out. Now let's give them a nice French stitch. Okay, so now let's put the top and the bottom together. So you can see our marks right there. I'm going to match that up. I'm going to sew it. I'm going to go face to face. Sew it here on the back. So now the last thing this gets is the listing. So now we're going to get ready to install that cover right there. So earlier I saw what this came with here was like this plastic listing wire. So I'm not going to use that. So what I had on hand was some steel listing wire here. So I'm going to put that in instead. Well, let's just put this thing back together. Got our trusty old hog rings. You know, sometimes I just work on cruise control, so I'm just working through it, right? But then I realized I could tell you about technique number 498. Okay, what that is before you put the cover on, what you can do is you can actually mark where the hog rings go. So what you do is you can see the mounting point here for the hog ring, and you can mark it. And now for technique number 1468. Okay, what that is pulling something over. So it's been my practice, to do it probably different from what other people tend to do it. I think naturally, people, they just tend to pull something over like this, like it's a sock, like that. I guess you could do it that way, but you know what? Sometimes it's not that easy. That was pretty easy, but sometimes it's not that easy. So what I usually do is I'll turn it inside out like that, and I'll put my hand right on that corner, and then I roll it like that. So it's just another way of getting it done. So I'm just going to finish putting this seat back together. I'm not going to bore you with those details. One of the things that could be done with leather and vinyl, okay, we're working with leather here today. So you see this wrinkle right here is to put some heat to it, and that'll help shrink it. But there's a fine line. You got to get it super hot, okay? But you don't want to burn it. So that's the fine line. Now we just put on our welt. So I start on one end there. I pull it, put a little bit of tension on it, Pull it, anchor the other side. Then fill in the middle. So now I'm going to pretty much do the same to the bottom cushions. So anyway, like I was saying,